Hello, you. In 1966, a computer scientist called Joseph Wiesenbaum built a very simple program that didn't understand a single word that you typed into it. It just spotted patterns and then it reflected your sentences back at you, slightly rearranged the way that a very cheap therapist might. He called it Eliza. And then his own secretary asked him to leave the room so she could talk to it privately. Wiesenbaum was horrified. He'd built a party trick and people were confiding in it like it was listening. That story is 60 years old, and it's still the best explanation I know for why the word chatbot causes so much confusion in this sector. Because the system can sound like it's engaging with you while doing absolutely nothing on your behalf. It can reflect, it can't act. Today, we're talking about the thing that finally can act, agentic AI. What it actually is, the real difference between a chatbot and an agent, live examples from student services and admin, and because this matters more than any of it, where a human still needs to be stood in the room. It's hot, and I'm bothered, but I'm glad you're here. So let's talk about some AI. This is AI Levels, and I'm Andy Logan, the AI education guy. And in this show, we're going to talk about AI in higher and further education in a way that you don't have to stand there, nod along, and pretend you know what it means, because I'm going to explain it all as we go along. We're going to tell things through stories because I believe stories stick where slide decks don't. The wisest thing that a man once told me was that if you want to present to people, present a story and don't present a slide deck. The real difference between a chatbot and an agent is something we need to discuss, and we're going to get into that. We're also going to get into what agentic AI actually is in our explainer of the week. We're going to talk about real examples from student services and admin. And we're going to talk about why human oversight matters, because autonomous doesn't mean unsupervised. And we have a genuinely brilliant, slightly embarrassing legal case that proves exactly why. Let's get into it. Let's stay with Wiesenbaum for a second, because the Eliza story tells you almost everything about what a chatbot fundamentally is, even 60 years and several thousand upgrades later. Eliza had no idea what anybody was saying to it. It found a keyword, it applied a template, and it handed it back. I'm feeling anxious about my exam became, why are you feeling anxious about your exam? And that, my friends, was it. That was the whole trick. And yet people poured their hearts out to it because it responded. And a response feels like understanding, even when it's just reflection. That's the chatbot. All the way through to the present day, just with dramatically better reflection. Students ask about the extenuating circumstances deadline, and it tells them the date. Genuinely useful and bounded. It answers, but it doesn't act. So, what is the difference between a chatbot and an actual agent? Well, 33 years after Eliza in 1999, NASA launched a spacecraft called Deep Space One, and on board it put something called Remote Agent, built with the Ames Research Center. For a stretch of that mission, Remote Agent was given control. It was told, don't answer questions about the spacecraft. Here's your goal. You've got to keep the probe on course and you've got to keep the instruments working. And you have to work out how by yourself. Millions of miles from home with no possibility of a quick phone call to Houston when something went wrong. So what happened? It planned and it acted. It detected a fault in one of its own sensors mid-mission. It diagnosed it and it worked around it on its own without a human anywhere near the loop. That's an agent. Not a better conversation, but a system that takes a goal, breaks it into steps, acts on those steps in the real world, and adjusts when reality doesn't cooperate. So if we bring it back down to earth, literally, that's the same shift that's happening in your offices right now. You have a chatbot and it tells a student extenuating circumstances deadline. But an agent will then submit the claim, check it against policy, notify the personal tutor, update the record, and confirm it to the student, all while they're still sat there. So the difference there is chatbot will give you an answer based on what you tell it. The agent will go away and actually proactively try to fix the problem or try and solve things for you. That's the difference. That's the distinction. Let's talk a bit more about what AI actually is in terms of agentic AI in this week's explainer. Now, you may remember when we talk about the explainer, the whole purpose of this is to take a phrase or a buzzword or some horrible tech saying that we decided to gatekeep normal people's knowledge of how things work in this mysterious world of cobwebs and magic by creating names for things that don't really make a lot of sense unless you understand what they are. And this is what I'm here to do today in the explainer, tell you exactly what it is without the fluff. Now, the thing to remember at agentic AI is that it's a property and not a product. Agentic AI is the capability of a system to plan and use tools and then take multi-step action towards a specific goal rather than just responding and stopping. Remote Agent back in 1999 could do that, but Eliza couldn't, not for 1 second, no matter how convincing she sounded to Wiesenbaum's secretary. An agent, singular, is the actual thing built using that capability, scoped to a specific job with specific boundaries. You don't deploy agentic AI. You deploy an agent, and what makes it worth deploying is that it has agentic qualities underneath it. Here's an analogy for you that I keep coming back to. It's like horsepower and car. A car is a specific object sat on your drive. Horsepower is the property that makes the car capable of moving. So you don't buy some horsepower. You buy a car that happens to have a useful amount of it. Now, why does this matter practically? Well, when a vendor, any vendor, tells you their platform has agentic AI, that sentence is content free unless you ask 3 follow-up questions. And do this every single time. You ask them, what does that do specifically? And how much independence does it display? And ultimately, who checks it? Agentic describes a capability, but the feature is the actual agent scoped to a task, and it still needs an actual human somewhere in the loop. Don't ever just take things at face value. Always check. Always check. Let's talk about some real world examples of how chatbots and student services and admin can be affected by these things. Back in the mid 2010s, Georgia State University had a problem that every institute will recognize: summer melt. Now, students accept an offer and everyone's happy. But then between acceptance and the first day of term, a chunk of them just vanish, usually because of some small, fixable admin snag that nobody caught in time. A missing form, a confused financial aid question, a deadline they didn't realise mattered. Now, Georgia State built a proactive advising chatbot nicknamed Pounce that didn't wait for students to ask questions. He reached out first, flagged issues as they appeared, and nudged students through exactly the admin step they were stuck on. The results were striking enough that it became one of the most cited case studies in American higher education, a meaningful cut in summer melt, concentrated especially among first generation and lower income students, the group most likely to disappear of a paperwork problem that nobody explained to them properly. And here's the thing we're sitting with: Pounce was still mostly a very well informed messenger. What's changed since then is that systems built on that same instinct can spot a problem early, reach out proactively, and then go and fix it. Not just tell the student they're mixing a document, chase the document, verify the document against the record, update the file, confirm back. That's the original Pounce idea, but as time's gone, it's been upgraded from reflection to action. You can see the same shift in extenuating circumstances conversations. A claim is submitted, is checked against policy, and is escalated only if it doesn't fit a standard pattern. Then it can be resolved in minutes rather than the 8 to 10 working days is still normal in a lot of institutions. In time-taking exceptions, a clash on accessibility request, checked against constraints, a fix proposed, it's escalated only if there isn't a clean fix in place. And IT and estates help desk, the entire life cycle of a password reset or room booking conflict handled start to finish doesn't route to a person. Now you can notice what's constant against every one of these from Pounce onwards. It's never the agent replacing the person doing the complex judgment. It's the agent absorbing the repetitive, rules-based bulk and handing the genuinely hard 5 or 10% to a human who now has time to actually think about it properly. That's the whole value case of what we're doing here. And it's exactly why the next story matters so much. I've mentioned a few times about the need to have human in the loop, or HITL, if we go back to those lovely acronyms that we like to use in tech. This is a story that I genuinely love to demonstrate why human in the loop is still so vital. And I love it because it's recent and it's real. And it's probably my favourite story of the day. In 2024, a man called Jake Moffat was booking a flight with Air Canada following a family bereavement. And he asked the airline's chatbot about their bereavement policy. The chatbot told me he could book now at full price and claim a bereavement discount afterwards within 90 days. So he did exactly that. Air Canada then refused the refund because, as it turned out, that isn't actually their policy. The chatbot had made it up. Here's the part that makes this story worth telling on a podcast about education and not just a sales podcast. When Moffat took Air Canada to Canada's Civil Resolution Tribunal, the airline's actual legal argument was that the chatbot was a separate legal entity responsible for its own words, and Air Canada should be held liable for what it said. The tribunal wasn't having any of it. The ruling was blunt. A company is responsible for all the information on its own website, whether it comes from a static page or a chatbot, and Air Canada had to pay up. Sit with that for a second, because it's the whole HITL argument in one sentence. There's no such thing as the AI decided, not us. There never was. The question was never whether a human is accountable. It's where in the process a human needs to be accountable. Where do they need to check something before it goes out the door and becomes a promise that the institution now has to keep? But let's go one layer deeper than just have a human check it, because the Air Canada case actually has a root cause. And we talked about it last week: hallucination. The chatbot didn't lie. It generated a plausible sounding answer with total confidence using nothing but general pattern matching, because it had no actual grounding in Air Canada's real policy documents. It wasn't looking anything up. It was guessing fluently. And fluent guessing is genuinely the single biggest risk in this entire space because it doesn't look like a guess. It looks like an answer. This is the bit worth being properly skeptical about because, and I'm going to say this plainly rather than dance around it, not every platform out there is going to solve these problems. A lot of them will demo beautifully and then in the wild quietly make up things in the exact same way that the egg handler bot did because they're not genuinely grounded in your institution's own sanctioned content and rules. What you want and what you should ask is this. Does this chatbot answer strictly from approved institutional content and policy? An actual bereavement fair, not a plausible guess? And does it give you an honest answer if it can't find the right information? The problem is the right behavior is boring and unglamorous when it says, I don't know or I don't have an answer. But then what it does do is it hands off cleanly to a human with the querying context intact rather than leaving it and trying to find something confident sounding to fill the silence. That's the difference between a system that's merely fluent and one that's actually trustworthy. Fluent got Air Canada in front of a tribunal. Grounded with a clear route to a human when it hits the edge of what it knows is what keeps you out of one. That's a practical exercise. And I genuinely do it before deploying anything. Map every action the agent could take. Sort them by risk and reversibility. Low stakes and reversible. Booking a room, chasing a document. Fine to let that run. Check it periodically. High stakes are hard to undo. Anything touching a student's academic record, a financial commitment, a safeguarding flag. You need a human reviewing it before it happens. Not auditing it afterwards once it's already gone out. Get that mapping right, and agents are a genuine, sustainable advantage. Skip it, and you're one confidently wrong sentence away from your own tribunal story. Let's talk about the signal. If you remember, the signal is our weekly snippet of news where I try to find something that's a little bit out there, a little bit esoteric and a little bit different. And this week, we're going to talk about a stat, and it's going to land directly on top of our Air Canada story we just spoke about. A major report on the state of AI agents this year found that nearly half of employees are already using AI agents weekly or daily. That's fine, it's expected. But here's the number that should get your attention. The same research found the overwhelming majority of organizations, high 80s percentage wise, had experienced at least one agent related security in the past year, alongside a sharp rise in what's been called shadow agents, staff quietly using agentic tools nobody in IT or governance has signed off on. If you put the next to Moffat in Air Canada, every one of those shadow agents is a chatbot that could, right now, confidently invent a policy that doesn't exist. They could invent it, give it to a real student on your institution's behalf, and nobody will catch it before it goes out. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to ask, this week, not eventually, who's already experimenting? What are they touching? And where is it landing? We don't know, and we know, and it's fine, are very different answers. And right now, to be honest, when asked institutions, they only give me the first answer. So let's bring this home. Eliza can reflect, but a remote agent can act. And everything that's happening in your office right now sits somewhere on that 60-year line between the two different types of agent. Agentic AI is the capability underneath. It plans, it uses tools, it takes multi-step action, and the actual agent is the scope specific thing you deploy on top of it, doing the pouch job properly, catching the problem early and this time actually fixing it. But none of this works safely without someone deciding deliberately where a human sits in that process, because as one Canadian tribunal made very clear, the chatbot said it is not a legal defence. You should be excited about this. You really should. Just bring your brain and not just your enthusiasm. Next week, we're going to talk about grounding. What does it mean for AI to actually know your institution rather than just knowing everything in general and nothing in particular? That was AI Levels. I'm Andy Logan, your AI education guy, and I suggest you go out and enjoy some sun, touch some grass, enjoy it while you can. And let's all hope that we're here back next week talking about England still being in the World Cup. Have a good week. Take care. Bye.